Welcome. You're listening to the A Minute to Midnight show. This is Tony. I'm recording this from New Zealand. Today on the show, I will be talking to Doc Marquis, who is in the United States of America, and recording this introduction retrospectively. It's a great interview, and I learned a lot from Doc, so I hope you enjoy this fascinating discussion. I want to extend a warm welcome to Doc Marquis. Actually, this is the first time you've been on the A Minute to Midnight show, but I'll be totally honest, Doc, that from day one I've been wanting to get you on the show. You've been someone that's been on my mind, so welcome today.
Thank you.
It's awesome to actually finally get this to happen. So we'll be covering two main subjects today that are quite different from each other. Firstly, a bit on the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, and then later on we will be talking about your new book. So first off, with the protocols of the learned elders of Zion, it's a document around which there is much controversy. Many people use this as their reason for blaming Zionism and Israel and ultimately Jews for all of the world's ills. If a Palestinian terrorist kills someone, well, it's the fault of the Zionists. In fact, Some of these people probably, if their cat dies, they'll find a way to try and blame it on Zionism. You know, it's just it's ridiculous. But of course, there is some truth in it all underneath it as well. So what I'd like to do is to know, from your research, because I know you've researched it really well, what your take is on this whole protocols of the learned elders of Zion and where it fits.
Well, actually, I didn't have to really do any research in it. You see, I learned all about the protocols when I was in the Illuminati, and I can tell you right now, beyond a shadow of a doubt, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion is a coded Illuminati document. You see, any document that the Illuminati produces will usually be written in a code. And obviously, if you don't know the code, you're going to think it's something else. And it's the same with the protocols of Zion. Those are actually the minutes of the meetings of the Order of the Illuminati. And if you know anything about the Order of the Illuminati, you know when it was first created that Dr. Adam Weishaupt, the very first head of the Order of the Illuminati, he wrote out a 7-part plan for global conquest. When we turn to the protocols themselves, you will see by reading it the 7-part plan which he had originally penned. Now, the rest of the document itself, let me back this up a little. No one knew of the existence, obviously, of the protocols because they were secret documents relating to the plans of the Illuminati, which were discussed at their various meetings. However, this one Char lady back in the late 1800s was working for one of the highest ranking Masons at the time. And you know as well as I do, Tony, that the Illuminati had already taken over the Masons back in 1786. So this Masonic head person would have been at the same time a member of the Order of the Illuminati. Now, that's not to say all Freemasons are members of the Order of the Illuminati. No, it would anyone who comes from Masonry who's in the Order of the Illuminati is a 33rd degree Mason who had also received their first degree. They were initiated, I should say, as a first-level priest in the Order of the Illuminati, or it's also known as a Druid priest. So that Masonic leader knew of the what's going on in the Illuminati itself and had in his possession a copy of the protocols, or what became known as the protocols, I should properly say. And this Char lady, she when she was going about her duties, happened to have come across them. And when she read them, she was so frightened by them that she stole them and gave them to her husband, and her husband gave it to this one Greek Orthodox priest in Russia that he knew. And the priest held on to those protocols, must have been a good, somewhere between 5-10 years, because he was so afraid of them, he didn't know what to do. Eventually, he had them handed over to Sergei Nilus, and that was the person who would originally have the protocols printed, originally in Russian, and eventually a Russian correspondent from England. His name was Nigel. Blimey, I can't think of his last name. But he found a copy of them in the London Library. Because he was a Russian correspondent to Russia for years, he could read, write, and speak Russian fluently. When he saw the protocols, he printed them as they were without realizing he was printing a coded document. Now, once we apply the code, you will see for yourself those plans in the protocols speak of future plans that would take more than 100 years to complete, but we see them happening today. And that's the thing people need to know about the protocols. It's not some sort of Jewish Zionist conspiracy or anything like that. No. The Illuminati want you to believe that because of the way they wrote the document. You see, let's face it, Scripture tells us that throughout the ages, Jewish people, and we know this is true, are going to be literally blamed for everything that goes wrong in this life. And that's the sad part about it. But
though there was, some obviously Jewish people in the original order of the Illuminati, like the Rothschilds, and
yes,
and Weishaupt was was Jesuit, and then it also had Jewish background. So I think this is the thing. It's like discerning the fact that yes, there are Jews and high-profile Jews in it, but the Illuminati is not a Jewish organization.
No, you have people in it who have old families there, like from Italy, Portugal, England, France, Germany. I mean, the list goes on and on. I know the old bloodlines. I was part of it. I mean, when I was a 7th generation Illuminati witch. My family's background goes back to 1789. And that's a long time. We come from a very, very old bloodline, as I said. So the others, as I said, it's not just Jewish. You've got people from just about every nationality you can think of. I mean, let's put it to you this way. If they allow Hillary Clinton in, they'll let anyone in.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, and if you want a good idea of who's in it, turn your eyes towards the Bohemian Grove. That is what I call the summer camp for the Illuminati, because that's exactly what it is when they go and worship the 40-foot owl in the center.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, for clarification, Tony, that is not Moloch, as some people have stated. They obviously were never in the Illuminati, or they know nothing about the occult. That is the Owl of Athena. And it was chosen because the name Illuminati from the Latin means the bearers of light, or the light bearers, the wise ones.
That's a good point to clarify. Now, is that the same as the Jewish Lilith?
No, Lilith was, according to Jewish myth now, was the original first wife of Adam, and because she didn't want to have sex with him, she was cast out of heaven, out of the Garden of Eden for disobedience, And supposedly she became the mother of all demons, vampires, werewolves, things that go bump in the night, that type of thing.
Aha. Good, that's great to clarify. Okay, so just going back, backing up a little bit. So Adam Weishaupt, you were talking about the coded. He was codenamed Spartacus, is that right?
Yes.
And so
Notice what you just stated. He had a code name, did he not?
yes.
So to this very day, so do members of the Order of the Illuminati. Things are coded so that no one can ever have the finger pointed at them. And it's the same thing with all their writings. I mean, I've got, I don't know how many Masonic books, well over 100 in my own personal library, and at least half of them are coded. But they haven't created a code. I can't read. I was in the Illuminati, so I can read a Masonic code.
What was the purpose of them coding it in terms of the way they did and writing the protocols? Was it like an instruction to each other?
Yes, this way only true members of the Order of the Illuminati could read beyond the code. Everyone else, as I stated, would think that these protocols represented some sort of Jewish Zionist conspiracy, and there isn't one. There has never been one, but when we look at documents such as the protocols and other things, they purposely lead you to believe that there is some sort of Zionist conspiracy going on. And that's just rubbish.
Okay. So what about the state of Israel and the Rothschilds, the Rothschilds' money that went into it? Because we know the Rothschilds are a high up Illuminati family.
It's the Rothschilds that are the head of the Order of the Illuminati to this very day. When I was in that, let me think for a second. When I was in, that was Maya Amschel, the Rothschild, who was the head of the Illuminati then. Nowadays, it would be Evelyn de Rothschild. Since he's the eldest son, he would be the head of the order to this very day.
Okay, so it's not Jacob, it's Evelyn.
No, Evelyn is the eldest. And since he's the eldest, it goes to him automatically. It'll go, now Jacob is the second eldest as far as I recall, so when Evelyn passes, it'll go to Jacob.
Right, okay.
Yeah. The Rothschild became the actual head after, hold on a second, memory. Who succeeded? Joseph Stalin.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they first put Lenin in as the head of, the Russian Empire after, they purposely overthrew it.
Yeah.
And then, as you well know, they murdered him.
Yeah.
And then, they did the same thing to Stalin. It was in between Stalin and Lenin that they finally realized that they're going to have to take it themselves. Because, quite honestly, the people they were choosing were getting too big for their own britches and would stand up against them in the Illuminati. Well, such mistakes are easily rectified. They got rid of Lenin by poisoning him. They did it to Stalin. One of the greatest puppets that they ever put into power was Adolf Hitler. But Hitler tried to broker a deal between himself and Edward VIII. And once the Illuminati found out about that, they brought him down, and they brought him down quickly.
That's interesting. I was going to ask you about Adolf Hitler. So, yeah, that is an interesting point. So what about Mazzini and his role and with the whole Albert Pike, conspiracy, the supposed leader, 1871?
Well, Giuseppe Mazzini was the second head of the Order of the Illuminati. And it was because of him that General Albert Pike, who was a Southern general for the South during the Civil War, Mazzini, guaranteed and brought Pike to his position as the supreme commander of the entire southern jurisdiction of Masonry. That was because of Mazzini. And, interesting fact, Albert Pike was rotting away in prison when the president, who happened to have been a fellow Mason, pardoned him. That's how he got out of prison. It took a fellow Mason to do it because he was guilty of high treason against the United States. And that's either a life sentence or death, depending on, the decision of the court. But in this case, he was pardoned by a fellow Mason. And after he got out, he reworked all of the Masonic rituals to where they reflected the belief system of the order of the Illuminati. And it was also Pike and Mazzini who came up with the 3-part plan to take over the world through 3 separate world wars. And the first 2 has happened spot on. It's exactly as they planned it.
Yes, and it's certainly shaping up. The third one is, you can see it. You can see the playbook in operation.
The third one begins by telling us that they're going to get the Islamic nations to rise up against Israel and start a war. And this is exactly what we're seeing happening in our day and age right now.
Yes.
And it was just, what was it? Israel just stepped out of, I think it was 12, 15 days worth of bombardment from Iraq. Yeah, it just stopped, I think it was last week. I think it was just about 4 or 5 days ago, I read that it finally, at least for now, has ceased fire, but we'll see how long that lasts.
And you see the fighting amongst Islam as well, the Sunnis and the Shias, Iran and all of that.
Now, and you can see the Illuminati is ramping up their plans with what was proposed for this Third World War, because let's just take a look at the last 5 years. We've had more Islamic terrorist attacks throughout the world than people would have thought would have ever happened. And now they're getting, the children and the ladies involved in this.
Yeah.
And, what was it? Just, let me think. It was March, April, and May. We had London bombed every single month. We had, what was it? Westminster Bridge, Parliament.
Of course, you had the Manchester thing as well. So, yes, there's a lot. England is obviously being targeted.
And look at France.
Yeah.
Here in America, do you know, and most people have no idea about this, and I'm absolutely gobsmacked over it, but the very first attack, as far as some sort of terrorist attack on American soil go, by the Islamic people, was back in 1972. They just think, 9/11. I was in high school back then. I remember these things.
Right.
I was in the Illuminati. Yeah. I remember what the plans called for. And to this very date, if we go from 72 all the way up to the present date, there's well over 65 different terrorist attacks on American soil.
And there's a lot of ones that have been foiled as well, my understanding.
You're right.
There would have been a heck of a lot more, except a lot of them have been discovered.
Well, the problem is, we have, and I can verify this, at least 25 different terrorist camps on American soil right now. 25 at least to my knowledge. And yet, the federal government isn't going in and doing anything about it.
So what's the Illuminati's plan for Israel?
They're going, okay, we'll have to go back a little so I can explain certain things. if you understand the Jewish mindset, you know that they're looking for the Messiah to come. They don't believe Jesus Christ was the Messiah because he didn't come on their terms. That's what it comes down to. They're expecting some sort of holy general that was going to sweep down and just kick the Romans out of that part of the world forever, and they would just reclaim all the land. Well, that's not what the Bible stated, but that's what they wanted. And when they didn't get what they wanted, well, they rejected him. And ever since then, the hand of God has been upon them, and it will not be removed till they're betrayed at the third temple by the Antichrist, who will sit upon the throne and proclaim himself to be God. Only then will the hand of God be lifted from them. Now, that being said, knowing that the Jewish mindset is trying to still bring in the Messiah, and I mean as quick as possible, back in the late 1800s, or actually it was somewhere around, I want to say 1868, somewhere around there. And I've got a copy of all this information I'm about to tell you. There was one Jewish rabbi who explained to the Rothschilds that if you will buy the land upon which the Temple Mount rests and the land around it, we'll be able to offer up the perfect offerings to God, which will bring in the Messiah quickly. Well, the Rothschilds themselves, and this was in the Vanity Fair magazine of that year, I think it was 1868. It could have been a couple of years down the road, because I've seen the article myself, the original, in which it clearly stated that the House of Rothschild bought the Temple Mount and literally thousands of acres around it. They own and control the Temple Mount, and it makes perfect sense that they would want it, because the prophecies state that the Antichrist is going to rebuild the third temple, and who better than one of their own to do it? And if they're going to do it, they've got to make sure they own the land to build it upon. And if we look even just maybe not even 15, 20 years down the road after that, they bought all the land in the area that we know is now called Rishon LeZion. It's one of the biggest and most thriving cities there in Israel. And it was bought, again, the entire land and everything by the Rothschilds family. And somewhere around the 1900s, early 1900s, representatives from Rishon LeZion basically sent a letter with a number of their representatives to meet with the Rothschild family in England and basically tell them, if you would take your hands off of this land, we can make it thrive. Because quite literally, it was going to the ground. And the Rothschild family, I can't remember who was the head at the time, basically told those people, he said, I built Rishon LeZion, I alone, and I alone will determine what shall happen to it.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. They own these things. The head of the order of the Illuminati own the Temple Mount, thousands of acres around it. They own and control Rishon LeZion, and I don't even know how much more in that one area alone.
That's really interesting. What do you think the Rothschilds' reason was for creating the Supreme Court building, which is so Illuminati, so Masonic, it's not funny. You know, everything's laid out that way. Why did they do that?
Well, have you ever seen a map of Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Okay. Then you know it's based on certain Illuminati and Masonic occult symbols. Now, I first showed these maps. It was less than a week after I got saved. And it's the same thing with the back of the dollar bill. Those two seals are not the seals of the United States. They are the seals of the Order of the Illuminati, and I can prove this. The same thing with the maps. Washington, D.C. was originally laid out in 1791 under the orders of the Illuminati to form these occult symbols. They had already had their agents in place in many different parts of government. And I'm talking about the earliest people. Even George Washington warned of their infiltration into American politics. John Adams, the third president, was the one who also fought against Thomas Jefferson because he knew Jefferson was a part of the Order of the Illuminati, and he fought against him for the presidency, and he won.
What about George Washington, though? He was actually a 33-degree Mason himself.
No. He was a third-degree Mason. Yeah, he was a third-degree Mason. In other words, he was in what's known as the Blue Lodge, where the first 3 degrees are. It's entered apprentice, accepted apprentice, and master Mason. You see, at that part of the game, if you would, if you're in the Blue Lodge and you stay there, you will learn nothing about Masonry. And that's it. I mean, what you end up doing, you'll pay dues every year. And the reason most people will never get out of the Blue Lodge is because they join the Masons just to get all the good deals. You know that expression, we're going to give you a square deal.
Yeah.
It comes from the Masons. Every Mason is obligated by their oaths to give a fellow Mason the best deals they can. So let's say they sell something for $100 on, what is that, retail, but they bought it wholesale, let's say at $10. Under their obligation, their oath, they're obligated to give it to their fellow Mason for just $10.
Wow. You know, that's interesting. I can't name a name, but even here in New Zealand, I know somebody that works in a bank, and he said normally in the bank, you can see the records of anybody that comes in to do a transaction, but if it's somebody high up in the Masons, that screen automatically goes blank, and the teller or whoever's working cannot actually see anything about the transaction that they're doing. So that's I found that really interesting. That's from somebody inside there that he said, don't tell anyone my name that told you that. But
yeah, well, it's the same thing with here in America. Do you know that the president is a third-degree Mason? He's a master Mason, Donald Trump.
Can you elaborate on that? Because I have definitely suspected that. But yeah.
Yes, he's been in the Masons since the early 80s, as best as I recall. But again, we have to. One thing is important to note: he's only a master Mason, a third-degree Mason. If he was interested in pursuing Masonry, he's been in now for 30-some-odd years. He would have gone well beyond third degree, but the only reason he's staying there is, again, because of all the business deals. I mean, think about this for a second. Let's say Trump Towers. Let's say it would normally cost, about $1 billion to build? Well, because he's a master Mason, he could get all the materials and labor and everything for bottom price. So he would literally save at least $500 million. I think that's a good reason to join the Masons, at least from a businessman's perspective. I would never join the Masons because they are so anti-Christian and they do worship Lucifer. It's all in their own writings. I've got a DVD, 4 hours long, two discs on this, and I used more than 100 Masonic books, their own material now, to put this DVD together so no one could say, I made this up. This is straight from their own Masonic teachings now.
I've seen Albert Pike's writings about the pure doctrine of Lucifer, in the Morals and Dogma. I mean, it's pretty. You can't really argue with it. That's.
Well, you're talking page 861 where it says no. That's how long the book is. He said that which we say to the crowd is this. You may repeat it to the brethren of the 30th, 31st, 32nd, and 33rd degree, that the Masonic religion should be held by all of us high initiates in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only 30th degree Masons and above are allowed to know this. But now listen to what he said. May know. He didn't say definitely will tell them. No, he said they may know. They're still at that point making sure that the person who they're going to entrust with their secrets is worthy of it and will keep them. Because you just don't tell everyone, hi, we're really, in the order of the Illuminati like that.
Yeah.
No.
So that's this is fascinating. I just want to quickly go back to George Washington before I forget. See, that's then a lot of misinformation out there, because there's a lot of people out there saying he was a 33rd degree Mason, and so you'll basically put that into perspective.
No, he earned his 3rd degree. Now understand, the 33rd degree in Masonry, what's known as the Sovereign Grand Instructor General, that's an honorary title. That is not actually a degree. Most presidents have been given that honorary title in the past. Of course, if I was the president, I would never let them give it to me. Nevertheless, to this very day, this title will be given to the president if the president wants to accept it. And the reason it's honorary, and I'm going to explain something to you very few people will ever hear. In the 33rd degree, the initiation ceremony, once it's done, the candidate will be brought to a room, and he'll be left in the room. There'll be a person to the far left-hand corner of that room when he enters, and before him there's going to be 2 thrones. On the left-hand side will be the complete regalia of a priest. On the other side will be the complete regalia of a monarch, a king or an emperor.
Yeah.
The person inside the room to the left-hand corner will say one and only one word to the candidate. He will say, choose. Now, if the candidate for the 33rd degree chooses the regalia on his right, which is the regalia of a monarch, he will be given his 33rd degree certificate. He'll be given a pat on the hand, a shake, and they'll usher him out of the room. Now, if the person chooses the regalia of a priest, he will then be taken out of the building and driven somewhere else to where he will be fully initiated as a 1st level Illuminati witch.
Wow.
You see, there's a very old rude or saying in the order of the Illuminati. Now let me think. It goes, let the kings be kings, let the priests be priests, let the bankers be bankers. What this saying means is, let whoever wants to run the country run it, because everyone knows the priests are the power behind the throne, and the powers behind the priests are the money. That's why if they choose the regalia of a priest, that means they've achieved the right amount of enlightenment to become a priest now, but in the order of the Illuminati. They've been moved up.
I've never heard that before. I bet most people, like you say, will never have heard that before. That's a huge piece of information you've just given us here. Well,
that's why I make these DVDs, Tony. I mean, I have, I'm not just doing this because I'm ending up as a millionaire. If anyone looks, as I was about to say, if anyone looks at my bank account, but I'm too poor to even have a bank account. No, I don't have one. I do this because I want the people to know the truth before it's too late.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great reason to be doing it. And, really appreciate Appreciate it. This discussion is fascinating. There is so much more we could cover, and I think it'd be great to have you come back and do some more on this at some point. But we also need to cover your, book, because hopefully that'll help to make you some money as well. So it's a bit of a different topic. Normally, we generally steer away from the rapture as a topic much on the A Minute to Midnight show because it ends up so controversial.
People are going to get ugly.
Yeah, that's it. But I did give Michael Snyder a chance to talk about his book, which was on the rapture, on his belief system. So I think, this time, I really respect you. And so I think it's really good to hear a little bit of your take on it. And I think this book will be fascinating. So perhaps you could just tell our listeners a little bit about the book, the name of it, and what's happening with it.
Sounds good. Well, to begin with, it's not my perspective. Understand, I don't take credit for any of the teachings in it. 25, 30 years ago, I had heard, I had graduated from Louisiana Baptist University. That's my alma mater, class of 84.
Yeah.
Blah, blah. And I learned the next 5 years probably more different perspectives and arguments about the rapture than you and I will ever know what to do with. And now, let's face it, we've got another perspective. I think it's called the pre-wrath perspective, if I remember.
Yeah.
Or what I call the new flavor of the month. But, so it was somewhere around towards 88, 89. I had a long discussion with God, and I said, okay, Father, I know what I think is right, but I need you to tell me what is right. Because you see, the thing is, I'm not interested in being right. I'm interested in knowing the truth. Just because I think I'm right doesn't mean I am. I ask God to show me his truth. And a couple of weeks later, as I'm delving into this, all of a sudden, and I really do mean all of a sudden, I don't know how else to explain this, but to say information was suddenly downloaded into my mind, and I started understanding what God was saying about the rapture all along. You see, we want to treat the rapture by pulling out a bunch of verses and saying, aha, I'm right. Well, if you're so right, why didn't God name one of his books after you? If God wanted your opinion, he would have said, okay, let's write the book of whoever.
Yeah.
Anyways, we can't look at the Bible as a verse. No. The rapture is an event, isn't it? I mean, one day, you and I are going to be minding our own business, and all of a sudden, we vanish.
Mm.
That's it. One event. There's nothing multiple going on here. And after that, well, according to the scriptures, we're taken to heaven. But that's the next rapture. That doesn't tell us what makes a rapture a rapture. And until we treat the rapture like an event, we'll never see it for what it is, because there's quite a number of raptures that's happened in the past in Christian history. And quite a number of them are written right there in plain sight in the Bible. And only when we understand what makes a rapture can we first find these events. And after we look at the pattern, because there is a pattern here. Once we look at the pattern of these events, it's easy to determine if it's pre, mid, or post-trib. Now, I'm always tickled at the fact that people will say, on the pre-tribulation perspective, began with Margaret MacDonald. Have you ever heard of her?
Yeah.
Yeah, in 1828, I believe it was, this young girl from Scottish and Irish background proclaimed that she had these visions and that these visions proved that, okay, people are saying that these visions prove that this is where the pre-tribulation perspective began. Those people either don't know what they're talking about or they're outright lying. Because when we look at, and I've got all the original stuff from Margaret MacDonald in my library, where she stated that, now remember, if she's pre-trib, if it was pre-trib, again, she doesn't know what she's talking about, because in her writing, she said that these torments and such come from the Antichrist, and we, the Christians, must endure to the end. That means her perspective is either mid or post, because the Antichrist persecutes a Christian after the first half of the tribulation period is over with.
Yep.
So she's not pre-trib, folks. That's the lie. But you have to read what she wrote. And as it says, it's in my new book. I completely spell out exactly what she stated in her so-called visions verbatim. And so someone here is lying to keep us from knowing the truth. Because you know how people would create a timeline of events, to help them, with work or whatever?
Yep.
What I did, I created a reverse timeline. I started from the day of Margaret MacDonald and worked it all the way back to when Christ was walking the face of the earth. And throughout this entire timeline, I went to the old books. We're talking about books that, most people have never read. I remember these things because I've read them in the past. We're talking about books that go back to the 17th, the 16th, the 15th century, 13th, all the way back to the 3rd, the 2nd, the 1st century. All the way back to the days and the writings of the apostles and their disciples now. And I put in, when I say dozens and dozens and dozens of examples and direct quotes from these people's original works, I'm not kidding here. And from these writings, you will find throughout the entire course of Christian history, from the days of Christ all the way up to the day of Margaret MacDonald, the only writings when it pertained to the rapture, all stated beyond a shadow of a doubt, it was pre-trib. It's only when we get to Margaret MacDonald that someone started infiltrating the church, if you would, and put in the false doctrine of post-tribulation. Post-tribulation. Now, a lot of people try to tell me, well, it's either mid, pre-wrath, or post. I have challenged, I don't know how many speakers or other people on this, just on this issue alone. I tell them, okay, tell you what. You're telling me it's pre-wrath or mid or post. What I want you to do then, do the exact same thing I've done. I want you to come up with dozens and dozens and dozens of examples in known literary books. Go all the way back, almost 2,000 years as I did, and let's see what you can come up with. And you know what? No one has ever taken me up on the challenge yet. Because, as I stated before, for almost 2,000 years, through the Christian teachings, our ancient forefathers all stated it was pre-trib. Only once you get to Margaret MacDonald did it become perverted.
Wow, that's interesting. That will be fascinating. say, firstly, the name of the book, I don't think you mentioned it. The name of the
Oh,
book is The Final Rapture. Is that what it's called?
yes.
Yeah. And but you say it's the final rapture because you're saying that there's obviously, for it to be the final one, means there's been previous raptures.
Yes. This final rapture that you and I are waiting on will end all of Christian history. Christian history, from the moment the trumpet of God is sounded, comes to an end. The world is then entered into a new age, a new history, if you would, in which 7 years is given over to Satan and his followers. And then after that, well, you know what the Bible says, but the Battle of Armageddon, all this other stuff. But the point is, the final rapture is what you and I will be looking towards next, as far as prophecy, the major prophecies are concerned.
Okay. So I've got a couple of questions from Scripture that I'd be interested to know what your take is then on how this works. I'll just read from Revelation chapter 6, 9 to 11. It says, "And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet a little season until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled." So
Right,
who are these?
That's a classic example people will use to say, we're left on the earth. Excuse me, no, that's not true. Because we find out after we're raptured, and we have to go a couple chapters before chapter 6, because people love to jump ahead to confuse the issue here. I'm not saying you, I'm just saying certain people in particular. They forget two important things. First of all, when John was brought up to heaven, he saw two groups of people. One he recognized. He recognized the apostles. He recognized the other elders. He recognized the group of Christians that was up there. But he pointed to this particular group of people and said, "Who are these?" He didn't know who they were. And this is when one of the elders, excuse me, I think it was one of the elders or one of the angels had said, "These are those that came through great tribulation." You see, these are people who got saved during the tribulation period. And the proof is very easy. We find out that 144,000 male Jewish evangelists, male Jewish men, are taught the art of evangelism and sent throughout the world. Remember them?
Yeah.
Well, you don't teach 144,000 people to evangelize the earth if no one's going to get saved.
True.
That's just common sense.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the two witnesses. Those people under the altar are those people who got saved during the tribulation period and were martyred. And Christ, even in chapter 20 of Revelation, points this out as a fact. But they avoid that chapter because it reveals what's happening.
Okay, yeah. So I've just got a couple more. That's a great answer, by the way, Doc. I just got a couple.
Let me just say one thing,
yeah.
if you don't mind.
No, go for it.
Okay. I did a show for Prophecy in the News, a major Christian ministry here in the States. We shot 8 shows last week. If you folks want to see what we're talking about in a more in-depth way, if you go to YouTube and type in Prophecy in the News, just look down about maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 things down, and you'll see what looks like an old fossilized cadaver that's still alive. That's me. And that's the show you want to look on. It says Doc Marquis / dash the Final Rapture. Watch that, folks, and you'll see exactly more of what we're talking about. Now, there's 8 shows we did, Prophecy in the News. we'll be putting these shows up as we go along, because on October 3rd is when the book is officially released. But we're asking people now to put in your pre-orders, because already it's getting very busy. And so if you want to, just go to my website, which is www.itsagodthingproductions. Now, that's all lowercase, no apostrophes. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com, and you can order it right there. Or if you want, speak to Tony afterwards. He'll give you all the information, whether he knows it or not.
Yeah, that's great. I was just about to ask you to give your website, so you've done that. We'll make sure we give it again right at the end as well.
Yeah, or they can write me at my email, which is docmarquis777@yahoo.com. Very easy to find me, or find me on Facebook under Doc Marquis or Joseph Marquis. Those are all the easiest ways you can just get right a hold of me, folks.
That's awesome, Doc. Okay, so just to finish off these couple of scriptures, it says in Revelation 6:17, "For the great day of his wrath has come, who shall be able to stand?" And then if I go over to chapter 14 and verse 7, and it says, saying with a loud voice, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the foundations of the waters." So I just wonder, that's chapter 14. So is that when the judgment of God starts, or has it already been going all through the book of Revelation?
No. If we go through the book of Revelation carefully, there are 4 sets of 7 judgments that strike the earth. Now, contrary to what some people want to believe, they're trying to say, well, Satan was cast out of heaven and his wrath is going to be striking the earth. You know what? That's just a lot of rubbish. Because we find out, and listen to one of the first verse you read.
Yep.
Did you notice it said the wrath of God?
Yep.
There is 8 times, to the best of my memory, in the book of Revelation, which tells us that the whole of the wrath of God is going to be poured upon the face of the earth, or the cup of God is going to be poured upon the wrath, his wrath upon the face of the earth. This is 8 times now in the book of Revelation. I don't think we can make it any clearer. And it's interesting to note, this is happening during the tribulation period, because if we go into the New Testament, it tells us that you and I and every other born-again Christian does not have an appointment to face the wrath of God. An appointment is when you have a time to be at a certain place, like at a doctor's office. You have an appointment to meet up with the doctor, a time and a place. Well, you and I, according to the scriptures, do not have an appointment to face his wrath, ever. And the reason is because you and I, and all of our sins, past, present, and future, have already been forgiven. They've been bought and paid for on the cross of Calvary. And because of this, and the fact that the next and final rapture happens right before the tribulation period, well, you and I aren't going to be around for it anyways.
Yep. This has been fascinating. Doc, this has just been awesome. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Can you just give your website one more time?
Oh, yes. My website, just put in the usual www. Now, all this is lowercase, no apostrophes. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. It's a God Thing Productions 777.com. Or write me on my email address, docmarquis777@yahoo.com, or look me up on Facebook. Look by the Doc Marquis or Joseph Marquis.
That's awesome. And yeah, that book of yours sounds fascinating and well worth people getting a hold of. Whatever their belief in the tribulation and the rapture is, I'd say, it's a must. It sounds great. So we'll be looking forward to that.
Well, it was the teaching on the Rapture, in particular, that Charisma House, my publishing house that, is publishing the book. They said the one thing that sold them on the book was the way I taught the Rapture. They told me now they've never seen anything like this before. And when I taught this in public, Tony, I'm not lying when I say this, at the last convention I did, I had dozens and dozens and dozens of people. I had pastors, teachers, lay people come up to me and ask me, where did you learn this from, Doc? Who showed you this? Why aren't we being taught this from behind a pulpit? And quite honestly, Tony, I thought this was common knowledge. I thought people knew this stuff. But I was wrong. And so if people will go to my website, they will find the way that they can order this book and everything.
That sounds fantastic. Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed this chat, and I really hope you'll come back on the Minute to Midnight show again, because, man, there's so many more things we could discuss.
It would be my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Doc. Well, I think that was a fascinating discussion. We will have Doc back on the show again soon. So if you haven't already done so, you may want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We put all of our shows out on YouTube, on iTunes, and audio only as a download on our website, which is aminutetomidnight.com. And remember, Midnite is spelled Midnite. A Minute to Midnight is run by a small team. We've got a couple of people in America and in New Zealand as well. And you can support us by donating if you wish. We really appreciate the people that do donate to this ministry. There's a donation button on our website. So yeah, thank you for those that do help us out. Also, I write, play and record all the music that you will find in our shows, and you can find a download for free collection of A Minute to Midnight Music Volume 1. That's downloadable on our website as well. Well, I think that's about it for this show. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.